Hello, my name's Nick Harris. I'm a children's book illustrator. Today I'm going to be using ArtRage Studio Pro to create a sort of swirling scene with a sort of swirling twirling effect, because that's what I've been asked to do for the ImagineFX Q&A section. As you can see, I like figure work, so I've started by drawing a figure in a sort of contraposted pose, or I am still drawing it. He's going to be carrying a kind of yoke with some buckets on it, because I thought that would be quite a good thing to be being swirled around. It's got weight to it, and it gives a good arc and a strong line, strong diagonal to make the thing dynamic. Drawing him from behind so you can only see his back, you don't have to worry about his face. I'll spread onto several layers with the drawing on one layer and painting using the oil brush to give some body to it on another layer. And now I've marked in an arc around which the effect can be mounted, as it were. It's best to do that. Give yourself some kind of guide. We can always lose that later. I've set a very warm base, as in very traditional sort of red oak kind of base, which is what they used to do in Renaissance times quite a lot. I'm not that old. I'm quite old, I'm not that old. The thing going on in my mind is some kind of swirl of birds. I haven't just seen the Hitchcock film. That's not why I'm thinking it. That's just what occurred to me, because they can fly for a start. Now I'm playing with the scale, trying to decide how to frame it in a composition. Great thing with digital, you can do all things like this. I could have done loads of thumbnailing and done it that way, decided on something and gone straight from that, but I like to start with a figure quite often and then decide what I'm going to do with it. As you see, I'm slapdashing paintbrush strokes around, trying to get a feeling of movement. Now that's a colour palette I created earlier, using some basic colours and then smudging them and mixing them in their different combinations. And then I saved the painting out as a JPEG, and I have used that. You can pin references onto the canvas in ArtRage, and then I just sample colours from that instead of using the normal colour sampler. Of course, you have to use Alt to do that. I'm on a PC. And as you can see, I've transformed the arc slightly again, made him even smaller, because I want the effect to be the important thing, not him. He's incidental. He's just there to emphasize what's going on, the fact that there's a force and it's turning him around. Because the main thrust of this is about doing the arc, the twirling effect. Now in the background, as you can see, I'm just starting to block in some colours to contrast with what's going on in the arc, which hasn't really got a colour much at the moment. I may leave it like that. And in terms of colour, I mean, it's going to be a pretty amorphous sort of background, open fieldy, kind of open grass area, the sky. That's moved on a bit there, I jumped a bit out. Could have been here all day otherwise. Blocking in some grassy colours. As you see, it's nothing exactly amazing. Just blocking it in. Now I've also introduced a bit of texture to try and give it some perspective. I've introduced texture to the front of the arc and not to the back. And I've done that using the glitter tool. Sorry, did I say that very well? Glitter tool, which sounds like a bit of a sort of a daft addition to have in there, but it's actually quite handy. I've used a sort of slightly multicoloured, and there are various options of shape. I think the one I've used is called grit. I can have it slightly multicoloured, as I've just said, and then go back into it with the palette knife to give it a bit of smeary effect and add more movement to the texture, make it more directional. You see, I'm fiddling around with various parts of the background and strengthened up the figure line a bit more, knocked that second layer of background down a bit, and I'm working a little bit of, not really detail, but a bit of interest into it. Try to make the sky pattern contrast in terms of its direction with the arc of the swirl, just to strengthen it. If you sit sort of more closely up, hopefully you would see that the brushstrokes also in the background, not just the actual pattern, but the brushstrokes go to contrast the swirl of the arc as well. Now I've laid a flat flood-filled wash in on a layer set to multiply in a sort of brown, because I wanted to darken everything a bit, and then I'm just working back into it to make it look more dramatic by cutting areas away or painting light colours into it. In fact, in this case, painting white, which is definitely a light colour. Some people would argue it's not a colour, but it does what I want today. Adding a little bit of interest to the grass in the background, just so it's not completely blandly flat. While we're closing like this, you can see the texture on the swirl a bit easier. This isn't supposed to be an eye test. I would have put a chart up if I wanted to do that. As you can see, I've marked a few bird sort of shapes into the swirl. Just picking out things in the background and making the sky a bit crisper in places. I don't intend to paint every bird in detail, well, paint any bird in detail, because they're supposed to be swirling so fast. That's why there's such a vortex, because they're swirling around amazingly fast. I want you to almost be able to hear the flap of wings without seeing a single wing in detail. Now, to get it to sit into the scene, I'd like it to be disappearing behind part of the grass. I haven't drawn it well enough to make it work really well, but I would try and make it disappear slightly behind that. It also helps with perspective, and having the path go into the scene like this helps to draw you into the scene. Hackneyed old trick, but it works. I've made an old grass brush and I've sort of splattered some different coloured bits of grass in the front. I'm wondering about having the arc sort of glow and light the grass as well, but I don't know about that. That might be a bit naff. A lot of things I do are naff. Hopefully I have time to go back and unnaff them, but sometimes I don't. That's how you can't expect everything to do to be wonderful. If anything, in fact. Well, that's how I feel. I'm sure you'll do much better. Don't be put off by the timer keep popping up now and again. I get a lot of interruptions when I'm doing things like this, and I just have to put it on pause. That's all that is. It's me pausing as I do this video capture. See, I've turned the dark tone on again and it looks much more dramatic. Don't know if I'll keep it that dark, that's a bit over the top. Starting to individualize some of the shapes. I don't know if that's a word. Individualize, I mean shapes, I'm sure shapes is a word. I said I wasn't going to really draw the birds in detail, and they might seem fairly detailed, but they're not really. They're just the basic shapes, and let's hope you can tell they're even birds, but I'm not using any reference. So I know birds have wings, I remember that much. That is birds that have wings, isn't it? Smearing some of the texture again. So you can make very painterly effects in ArtRage if you want them with the oil brush. You could use a paint tube to lay down big blobs of paint and then work that flat. The palette knife has various settings, some of which are very smeary, some of which are more blurry. But if you're using thick paints, obviously smeary works quite well. Just play with the settings, see how you get on. Just going around picking out bits and pieces. That was me just moving one shape. That was a bit of Camtasia you saw there. Whoa! See that little glop of birds? Glop, that's a made up word. Down the bottom, but it makes a bit more sense than some of the other bits. But then if you do that, then that explains what the rest of the stuff is without you actually having to detail it greatly. I'm all for doing, I love work where stuff is hinted at and it's just a few brush strokes. I can't do it myself. I don't paint like that. I'd rather draw every hair, but no, I'm not talking about a hairy bird, but a feathery bird. I'd rather do every feather then. That's my tendency, but that's kind of forbidden in what we're doing today. Now you see he's pretty rough. I don't know how far I will take him actually. As I said before, he's not the main idea today. He's just there to strengthen the idea. Oh, that was a quick shot of the other vidcap I'm doing at the same time. For the same Q&A section, not the same Q&A obviously, but that's about a figure dunked in the water. But let's get back to this one. In case you're wondering why it's all a bit ramshackle, this narration, it's because I'm doing it post making the vidcap. It's just how it worked out this time, because I had a problem with my sound for a while. My headphones went defunct and I had to carry on without and then come back with a new lot later, trying to solidify the figure a bit more. You can see the light is coming from the right. Well, no, the light actually is coming from the sky behind him, and the light on him is coming more from the swirl itself. As I said, I've got the swirl kind of glowing, so really he should be lit all the way round, but I find it's just working better if I'm having more lit from the top. It reads better. You can make decisions like that, artistic decisions like that. Just remember, you're in total control. You can break the rules about things just as long as it looks sort of semi-convincing. Yeah, I'm thinking about adding another figure. One being swept off its feet to add to the feeling of the force. No, we're not talking Star Wars. Not that kind of force. Just a force. Being swept off the ground. So you're working on a different layer, so if I don't like it, I can just get rid of it. Or on two different layers, in fact, a drawing and a sort of blocking in colour-y thing. Yeah, so it kind of looks like that pose just about works, I think. He'll be half hidden within the swirl of shapes, birds, things, feathers, whatever. Added a few extraneous ones here and there. Just so it's going so fast, some of the birds are being almost flicked out or can't keep up or actually coming to join it. You make up your own mind. Of course, this same kind of principles will work sort of for whatever swirl you're doing. This happens to be about birds. It could be a bag of marbles swirling around in some strange wind. It could be whatever, but you know, the ones nearer to you look bigger, and because you're closer to them will be more blurred because relative to you they're moving faster. The ones in the back will be smaller. But if you want the feeling of movement, you need to make things indistinct and sort of show the movement, blur it. I wouldn't necessarily, you can use things like Photoshop filters and that, but well, obviously the way the palette knife works is digital itself is all a fudge, but I find things like the palette knife in ArtRage have a more real media look than some of these more photographic blurs and effects like that. I think I say in the written version that goes with this in the magazine, I say that you could use sort of radial blur on Photoshop or some other software, but it's and that's good, you know, but it's not kind of the effect I want here. There we are. See, I sort of painted him and then I kind of lost him more in the blur because I think it's more convincing that way. He's all a bit colourless at the moment. I'll have to slap a few tones on him in a minute. I thought I'd give him a bit of a head as well. I originally had his head tipped right down, but that looked like someone had lopped his head off. You have to sort of beware of doing things like that. People can get completely the wrong end of the stick. Adding a bit of sort of tone and shade, just to try and add some form, really. As you see, I've put a little bit of tone on him now, beefing up the light at the back a bit. I've got some bits of wispy grass and that beginning to come in now, where it's been ripped out of the ground by the force. Because I mean, if it could take a lad off the ground or a small man, then surely it would be enough to rip up a few turfs of grass. Feeling around with some shapes, some birdie shapes in the swirl. Again, nothing very distinct because it's all moving so fast. You're only catching glimpses of what's going past. That's the idea anyway. Some of the shapes around the outside I think could do to be a little bit better described, because that will help rather than hinder. It shouldn't actually slow down the movement. That's ArtRage having a think. Every now and again it pays to check, see what's going on, turn layers on and off. That's something I do quite often to make sure I'm painting on the right layer for a start. I'm good at painting on the wrong layer, even if I've named them, which I don't always do. I don't name all my layers. I name just enough to act as a kind of roadmap here and there. That's me merging a layer down with another one. That's me going back to my sticker spray grass. Now, this is okay, but it does, unfortunately, the settings I've got, I don't really want to go and change the settings because I had fun getting them in the first place. But the grass is all kind of vertical, so that doesn't really work. I wanted it swirling. So I will add more strokes using the ink pen, the ink line, as it were. That's got some nice settings in it for smoothing. Which means you can make, there we are, you saw the smoothing briefly there, but it's not so much that's the taper length. Make the taper length long, and then it tapers out both ends, makes some really nice marks, like nice ink pen marks. And I'm adding more fronds and things that way. And I will carry on working in this kind of way. I think you've got the gist of where we're going with this. That's me with the ink pen again. So we won't be going on a great deal longer. If you want to get more comments, I would go and read it in the magazine or download it, because the magazine is downloadable as well. See, I've got to make the grass in the back smaller as well. I got that wrong earlier on. I had all the grass the same size. There we go. That's me. See you next time.